Hi everyone, my name is Jen and I work at Fastly as a product manager. I work on internal tools and products in the platform engineering organization there. I'm going to talk to you today about SRE and product management. I'm not on Twitter, but I am on LinkedIn and Instagram, so I put that in there so you could reach out to me. And a little bit about me, I run marathons and I draw a lot and I'm a GIF enthusiast. Also, I'm going to talk for about 20 minutes and then we'll do questions. So be thinking of that so we can have an interesting conversation. Okay, sometimes SREs must do product management. Yeah, boo, it's tough. I know, it's tough. Yes, you do it. Okay, so there's going to be some terms I'm going to go through and explain. So on your team, there might not be any product people. There might be a technical program manager. There might be neither of those. I'm just going to go over some key differences. The internet and people will tell you many, many different things. But for this presentation, this is how I'm summarizing it. Both product and program managers are leaders who impact business goals. Product focuses a little bit more on ideation, and they're a little closer to the users than to the engineers, as technical program managers are. They're often focusing on just growing the product and delighting the users, as opposed to the general health of the tech stack, although they care about that too. But my big way that I summarize it is product managers are focused on what and why, and program managers are focused on when and how. Okay, so when do SREs do product management? All of the gosh darn time. You already do it. Anytime you're creating something that someone else is going to use on your team or on another team, or that future you is going to have to respond to, like when you create an alert plan and then you get the alert later and you're like, oh my goodness, I don't know what this is. That is maybe bad product management, and we could riff on it from there. Okay, so yeah, proofs of experiment, internally negotiating with other teams, things like that. And anytime you make something with a UI, you have to be thinking about product management and about your users. So I'm going to go over some best practices I've landed on over the years. But why should you listen to me? I got a boo already. I've been talking for a couple minutes, and I'm basically, I don't know what to do about this, because that's not how the slide should look. Can an IT person in the back help me? I see someone coming. I met Kirk earlier. But basically, I'm a stranger, so why should you trust me? The presentation's all messed up. We'll get to it. Okay, you guys are getting a preview of what's to come. These are my notes. It literally says I'm a stranger. Okay, let's see. Okay, we're back. So, yeah, I know. It's real good. Okay, as I was saying, I'm a stranger and you should trust me. Okay. So, but seriously, this is how I've figured out what I'm going to present to you. I've gotten it wrong before when leading software, infrastructure, and platform engineering at my previous company. We perfectly engineered a new continuous delivery pipeline. It was spectacular. And we effectively broke the workflow of the entire design team and the QA team. So, initially I was at BuzzFeed as a technical program manager. I was there when BuzzFeed was growing a lot. You didn't have to stay in your lane. We could all experiment a little bit. And I was on the software infrastructure and SRE team. So there was room for me to focus on products that help reduce toil. But I wasn't I was just kind of going at it blindly and feeling just proud of myself. But then I talked to a lead product designer, and she really helped me out and put some stuff in perspective for me and taught me about empathizing with my users a little bit more. And I took those learnings to LinkedIn's product SRE work, where I iterated on those processes and learnings, and then now I'm at Fastly as a product manager. Okay, so product management, it's about meeting needs. Like I said, product management is about empathy. It's about listening. It's about not assuming you know what's best. All right, and I'm going to let you in on a little something. It doesn't matter who does product work, as long as it gets done, as long as someone does it. And I know that makes it seem like my job isn't important, but it's more like the skill set is important. So you guys, among your team, your one person or your big team of only SREs, you guys can do this work. And then I'm going to go through a little bit of process, because for big bets, having like some guidelines really helps. So we're going to go over 5 steps to understand the users of your tools, products, and processes. How do you decide what stuff will make your lives and your users' lives better? And how do you stay on track and build the most impactful products? Okay, 1, know your users and talk to them. Most of the users of SRE products and tools and dashboards, they're your coworkers. Do not assume you know how your coworkers do their job, or that they use the same workflows as you, or are using your product or tool as you designed it. Also remember, it's not just engineers who push code and impact the reliability of your stack. Product designers, data scientists, and product people have been known to occasionally edit code and make production changes. They are your users as well. So you need to do user interviews to really get a handle on who you're working with. Sometimes a survey is good, but I highly recommend you take a higher touch approach, at least with some of your audience, in addition to or in lieu of a survey. You're going to want to come prepared with questions, and we'll go over how to write those questions next. But this is my recommendation, and what I found has worked for me, no matter what my title has been. So put 30 minutes on the calendar. You, either alone or with one of your teammates, just keep it to 2 so you don't overwhelm the interview subjects. Meet up with up to 2 people at a time. That keeps the group small enough so you can really hear what people are saying. It allows for the conversation to kind of wander. Interview team leads and managers, that's one group. Interview them separately from ICs. They view the business differently, and their workflows are really different. And also be sure to share your findings with the rest of the team. If only 2 of you are going to the user interview, recap that. And then I want to go again to diversity among interview subjects is important. Again, do designers use your tool or service? Do both super senior people and interns? If only one of those groups does, how come? It might take you a bit to figure out who all your users are, but you should be interviewing a diverse swath of them. All right, how do you write these non-leading questions? Again, do not assume that your user actually uses your tool or that they use it as you intended. Do not assume they like your product, and come prepared with these questions written out. So I'm actually just going to talk through these examples. Okay, so Chef, that is used at Fastly. A way I could learn more about how Chef is used at Fastly, like when I was just onboarding there, is a leading question would be, do you have problems with Chef at Fastly? That assumes that people are using it. It makes them think only of negative stuff. We bypass a lot of like how they use it and what they like about their workflow. So instead, I could be asking, have you created a Chef cookbook at Fastly? If so, tell me when and walk me through how. You see, that's like way more open-ended. There's a lot of space for people to voice their experience. It also works for like non-software things that you might be spearheading. So when we have like a big compliance effort in an SRE org, sometimes it's documented on spreadsheets or like 100 JIRA cards. In this case, a spreadsheet. Like a leading question is, do you wish correlating estimated resource weeks to priority happened automatically? Like that's so specific. Instead, you could say like, do you use the SRE compliance spreadsheet, and kind of go from there. Let's say you rolled out a new deployment workflow for the bulk of the engineering org, and you notice people are not doing many deploys, and they're always huge. So you just ask that. And it's like pretty confrontational, and will close people off, and it's pretty leading. You're only talking about what they do wrong. Instead, just say, what are your steps from going from code committed to code successfully running in production? Like, see how much more space that gives you. You talk about maybe there's nothing wrong with how this new deployment process you rolled out, but maybe there's something earlier in the development or testing section that's really catching folks off guard. All right, prototyping sprints. This is a fun one. Okay, so now you're ready to build. It's sort of like a hack week. 1 week, one focus for all. You gotta narrow in on some users. Some are more important than others. And because you got this limited time and limited focus, you got limited scope, and you really gotta take some risks and build stuff. So when you come up with your topic for your prototyping sprint, be sure to think about who would really be most impactful. It can include people not directly on your team. Maybe include like a stakeholder. So for example, if you're prototyping a new feature on like a monitoring dashboard, invite an application engineer who will use the dashboard one day, and maybe a product designer, because they're just like better at UI stuff. Or let's say you're making a build versus buy decision for an API gateway or something like that, some tool like that. And via some research, you're like pretty sure the answer is buy, and like you're tired of your boss asking. But you can confirm it quickly in a 1 week prototyping sprint. Set like a modest goal that will answer for you within a week whether or not you should invest elsewhere or build it yourself. And that'll make the conversation a lot easier with your manager. Okay, we're gonna talk about roadmaps, which I know some teams have and some don't. I know it's because we have to balance reactive work as SREs and planned project work. I want to make the case for the planned project work even if you feel you're really underwater. The planned project work is how you scale. It's how you increase stack stability and reliability. And like sometimes it's how you get promoted. So consider it. Okay. So this is a really simple roadmap, and it's purposely about tacos and food because like we all have that vocabulary. Okay, so you'll notice there's higher priority projects above, lower priority ones below. Making tacos, we want to feed the family cheaply and quickly on a weeknight. If we don't get to dessert, it's okay. So that's what a lower priority project is. Like nothing's going to break down. Like the children will still learn tomorrow in school. I won't be hangry. Like it's all good that way. So let's talk about the higher priority project, making tacos. As I said, the user-centric goal, feeding the family cheaply and quickly on a week like. That sets your scope. That is your true north. You aren't feeding a wedding party. You aren't experimenting with a fine cut of beef. You are just doing it cheaply, quickly. You are getting it done. In there's a stretch goal as one of your deliverables. If you have time for a side, that's great. But if not, the project doesn't fail. We still all get fed. Okay? So yeah, including more than just technical deliverables helps define scope. It's like your true north, a user-centric goal. It's what and why. Deliverables answer how and when, and they're typically more technical and focused on tactical implementation. Okay, so let's do an engineering example. So let's say you're leading your engineering org through a program to transition to a new CI service, and you want the Eng org to use it pretty uniformly. That's probably not one project. It's probably a couple projects. So you could break it out like this. Let's start with a new CI pilot. The stakeholders kind of remain the same throughout. It's always the Eng leads at the company. But the first goal is we really just want to get early feedback on the new CI pipeline before we roll it out to the rest of the 150 people. So let's talk through the deliverables. The first two are almost always going to be the same for your projects. They're going to be user interviews and sharing your findings. And then an architecture design doc. Let's just plan a little early. And then in this case, we want to select one engineering team for the pilot. You know, someone who maybe we have a relationship or they have pretty standard applications. For whatever reason, they're a good fit. Then we'll have our technical deliverables that were figured out in the architectural design doc. We're going to migrate those team services, and your final deliverable is also always going to be the same. It's a retro of some sort. Notice in this case, it's not just the SRE team, but it's also the engineering team you piloted this CI pipeline with. Because when you're doing something like this, like rolling out a new CI system, Some of it's just communication and coordination, and the recipients of that need to be part of the conversation when you're going to move forward. Okay, so then you have your second project. It's you want the CI to be like generally available to the rest of the engineers. But the goal is not just like roll it out. That's not the project. The user-centric goal is improve all engineer CI workflow. So this is probably scoped to all the non-legacy applications that have owners. And so those ones you can kind of figure out your deliverables based on that. And the final project is kind of the cleanup work. The user-centric goal, though, it's not finish the transition. The goal is continue reducing risks in the engineering org. And you're going to do that. Your deliverables will be focused on transitioning the legacy and ownerless apps to the new CI. Maybe. But if our user-centric goal is to reduce the risk to the engineering org, for some of those like legacy apps that are maybe just like a business intelligence tool that some like very like early employees still use, maybe the goal is actually not to transition that to the new CI system. Maybe it's to help those application engineering managers transition those users off. So think about it that way. When you keep your user-centric goal, your true north in mind, it helps you figure out what deliverables are appropriate. Okay, how to use the roadmap. The team owns the roadmap, not the product manager, not the engineering manager, the team. You got to talk about it together. Add updates to the roadmap weekly or bi-weekly at most. Share your screen and update line by line the status for the incomplete projects and deliverables. And be willing to move some of those high priority projects down to lower priority. It should not be a surprise at the end of the quarter that some projects didn't get done because you've literally been talking about it every week. And then at the end, have a retrospective. This retrospective isn't going to be address technical hurdles or achievements. It's going to talk about the road mapping process. Did you guys estimate well? If not, you want to change that going forward. How was execution? Did you guys find that you like just didn't write out the tickets and get them done? You just kind of wiggled through it? Like maybe be more specific next time. All right, so I'm a big fan of retros, and also team leads and product managers don't have to lead them. Sometimes building that muscle in your more junior team members encourages them to speak up later. All right, so I want to make a note about the roadmap. I kind of gave it different examples. I like the spreadsheet form. It's pretty easy for us all to read, but it's an internal tool. Don't use it to manage up, to manage to your stakeholders. For that, you want to package the information nicely. Like communication isn't about just like tossing people information and having them interpret it. Communication's about helping people understand your message. So like write bi-weekly emails with the high-level achievements your team made or delays that they faced. Hold monthly status meetings with your stakeholders. And the point is to give them space to ask questions and give you feedback. All right, and then you're going to want to follow up with your users regularly. Just because you researched how your users work during the planning phase, which was maybe months ago, that does not mean their needs and pain points have stayed the same while you developed the product or endpoint or feature or infrastructure. To actually create something of quality that is usable, you got to keep communication open with your users. All right, so let's recap. You guys are all basically product managers now. Okay, so, but these are seriously things to keep in mind no matter what your job title is, no matter how senior you are. Develop relationships with your users. That's the first point. Talk to them often. When you are talking to them, ask non-leading questions. Really focus on listening. Prototyping sprints are wonderful. They foster team bonding. There's often a food budget, and you get answers to your questions really quickly. Develop user-centric goals when you have a roadmap. That helps you keep focused on your true north. And then follow up with those users. Don't assume that those users have stayed the same or that they're still using your product the way you thought. All right, I'm not on Twitter. Okay, y'all, so we have some time for questions. We have 10 minutes for questions. Oh, hello.
Hi. What's the biggest surprise you've had from a user conversation?
What's the biggest surprise? The question was, what's the biggest surprise I've had from a user conversation? Yeah, so I'm actually going to go back to one I had at BuzzFeed. And it's probably the biggest surprise because it made me realize the importance of user conversations. And it was that there's a QA team at BuzzFeed when I was there. And they did a lot of manual testing. And we had created this wonderful pipeline for folks to develop, test, and deploy there. And there was a one-stage environment. And previously, BuzzFeed, way back, had been a monolith, and there were these there were maybe like 6 stage environments. You're constantly just like claiming them and like coordinating with people. And because we just narrowed it down to one stage environment, and we're like, this is how you use it. It's perfect. It's always up to date. There was real trouble with allowing those QA people to actually do their job. They were constantly having new versions of the software deployed onto stage, and their tests would be interrupted. They couldn't avoid it. And so, yeah, that was one where I was like, oh gosh, I'm totally blind to this. And also because of like sometimes when you're on an SRE team or you have a title with word manager or something, sometimes people are maybe shy to come and say like, no, you did this wrong, And so we would have never found that out if we just hadn't asked. And I felt really bad about it. And it ended up being, once we shared those findings with the rest of the, at that time, platform infrastructure team, we all were like, oh my gosh, this is our first priority. Like, forget the load balancing feature we were gonna work on. We broke the workflow for a bunch of people. So yeah, it humbled me a lot. Yeah. All right, what else? Yeah.
So you may not have been informed like this, but in the infrastructure SRE world that doesn't have product managers, how can SREs get credit for doing product management work?
Yeah,
Like,
okay.
not just do it, but yeah.
Okay, so the question is like in an SRE or in some sort of infrastructure org that doesn't have product managers, how can SREs do the work but get credit for it? So sometimes that's tough because like when you voice to your manager like you're doing products work but that's not in your title. I certainly faced that when I was as technical program manager doing like more and more product work. They're like, why? So I think it's like just like do the work. Don't stay in your lane. Just like do it anyways. That is my advice. Still make sure your responsibilities are covered. And then like get the people who maybe aren't your manager, but like your peers seeing the value of it. I also like to write out like, sometimes when we're really good at our job and we're just like kind of cruising, our manager doesn't have to look at us, what we're doing, because we're just like kind of working. We like don't tell anyone about how great we're doing because we're just like kind of cruising through. So I'm like a big fan of the email update that's really just like, partly a shout out to myself. So I think as women, we should do that more, but also just, like get credit for what you do. You're awesome. So I know that was kind of vague, but put yourself out there and put out there what you do. Don't be afraid to, as part of explaining the new feature you are releasing, explain all the work you did into doing it. And give shout out to others who helped. Yeah. Yeah. Anyone else? Isaac?
What if you're the users? How would you go get another team or group where they're producing the thing that you consume to try and do this, aside from taking this presentation and saying, you need to watch this and do this?
Okay, so the question is, how do you get other teams where you're the user to start doing product work? Okay, yeah. So like, I think on a lot of infrastructure teams, software infrastructure teams, SRE teams, there's a bunch of us. And if one team's, preaching the user interview product gospel and the others aren't, like, it can feel like you're giving everything and getting nothing. I think like it's a slow process. Part of it is like some people don't understand that you're doing product and user interview work to make your excellent usable tools. So, we're at a tech conference right now, and I haven't showed you any slides with code. Be willing to say, like, this process is part of making our stack reliable. Like, treat product work as a first-class citizen. When you have when I was showing you the slide with rolling out a new CI system and deliverables, there are deliverables there that are not pushing code at all. They're retros, they're user interviews, they're sharing findings. And so the same way you would have tech talks at your company to explain all the cool stuff you're doing that you want other teams to do, treat this like that. It is a skill that other teams need to build, and you are lucky to have already flexed that muscle. Yeah.
How do you promote this when you may have pushback for saying, hey, that thought process may be waterfall? How do you say, no, this is part of the agile process? How do you get that buy-in?
Yeah, okay, so the question is, how do you promote this when you get pushback, someone saying like, no, that's waterfall, we don't do that. So part of it is how you show progress along the way. Like, it is not useful if, let's go back to the new CI system example. Like, if we're only showing progress when all the teams, all the applications have transitioned, that's like, people got to put a lot of faith in us, and that's honestly asking a lot of management to just let me keep working on this for months. So I think it's on you as the person doing the product management work to show incremental progress. That's why I'm saying write those emails every 2 weeks that show like, hey, we did user interviews. These were some unexpected findings. It's in a really early job out of college. I graduated during the recession. I was like weirdly employed in public relations, but I've like learned a lot from that. And a lot of it is about just like advocating for what you've done, and not because you're just like great, but because you want to share what you've done. And so like, yeah, you got to show incremental progress along the way, even if it's not technical. Yeah.
We've got time for one more question. Who wants to have the last one?
I think there's one fellow.
Do you think it's important for the product or program manager to have a technical background? And if so, how do you recommend finding such a person? And if not, then what do you think is important for that person to focus on?
Okay, so the question was, do you think it's important for the product or program manager to have a technical background? And then was there a second part to the question?
Sort of. So if yes, then how do you recommend finding such a
Yeah.
person? And if not, then what is important?
Yeah, okay, so the answer I think is yes for this particular section of tech. For other ones that are maybe closer to a UI, I'm not as convinced actually that you need a technical background. But I think it is helpful. So my background, I have a BFA in sculpture. But yeah, it's cool. But I also was someone who was just like a little gay kid who didn't have a ton of friends and was like alone in the room working on the internet trying to like meet people who were like me. So like I was also just good at computers. So I think be open to how people come about their technical knowledge. And then how you go about finding them. I think there's a lot of people who are good at writing code or at architecting systems and want to get a little bit more into something strategic, but they don't necessarily want to manage. Like that's a really good intersection. Like me, I'm an IC, and I like being an IC. But I also like working on strategic stuff, and this is a really cool intersection there. So I think those are kind of the skill sets to look for. Yeah.
All right, thank you for that. Let's give Jen one more round of applause.